Making a video. Yay. Yeah, okay, back at it. Anyway, so maybe in future, have a conversation with the Harry McCarpet thing. Yeah. She did ask some questions here. Passive aggressive, blah, 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 appreciate have children, meaning of it all, men and women living together, interesting stuff. Anyway, so yeah, maybe we'll do that. Look forward to it, kind of thing. So anyway, I was going to try to integrate some of her. Well, anyway, never mind. Moving on. Pyrrho. And so I fear somebody has to do the rational response to the Pyrrho conversational thing with Hothliday and inventive. Really need a better name than that. But anyway, I don't know. Anyway, and whatever, Eric the Red, which is sort of interesting. He was one of the first historical characters I ever heard of. He apparently discovered America first, they say. I don't know. Lack of evidence, I believe. Anyway, so I tried to take notes, but just didn't go anywhere. Because the conversation is so obtuse. So they were started on this meaning of things, and then Pyrrho has, of course, is injecting physics into it, and trying to say that somehow everything is everything because everything is somehow, connected by 7 degrees of photonic quantum separation or something. And it's just, forget about it. As I look at the world, right? This is almost gets to the Anaconda stuff too, so I might as well, that's somewhere in here, is his stuff. But he uses this word belief a lot. And okay, so yeah, that's sort of an important word. What do you really believe? And what are you really certain of, I guess is how I would put it. And so I could go down my list of certainties, So maybe I'll start where I was supposed to end. And then you'll know what the video is going to be about. I could say that I know evolution's a fact. I just know it. It's kind of stuff I bet all my organs on. Damn me to hell forever and ever and ever. Even for no profit, I would bet on evolution. Even if I couldn't win at Las Vegas and I could bet on evolution, I would still bet on evolution as being a correct description of our origins, our existence, what we're made out of, what made us, why we're here. Fuck. It's the answer. It's the correct answer. So I can say I also can understand that evolution as a design mechanism sucks. It's absolutely idiotic. Let's make 1 million of them and put them in a bottle and force them to kill each other, and whatever one wins will breed for no good reason whatsoever, and we'll just keep doing that forever. We'll kill 1 million to make one. Kill 1 million to make one. Yeah, it's just stupid all the way down. It doesn't go anywhere. It's stupid. So the design is crude and essentially self-justifying. It just says, you will survive because you've been designed to survive, and you survive because you're designed to survive, and you will survive because you're designed. It's just circular, self-justifying bullshit. So I also know, being sentient, that the worst that can happen is worse than the best that can happen. So the worst of the worst is worse than the best of the best. Yeah, I'm certain of that. I'm certain there's no good thing we're doing that's justifying any of the worst of it. No way. No way does it make up for it. Make it all okay. Just doesn't. Doesn't even come close. I could just go down. There's right now, right today, I don't know, what? 500 million rodents died today? And they died in all kinds of just hideous ways. Not just the ones in the laboratories we're torturing on purpose by injecting them with cancer, and trying to make them invisible, and trying to do make them fly and make them anti-gravity mice and all the other shit we're doing to them. The absolute torture they're enduring. But millions of them today. And just horrible, what did you do today to justify one of those? Just one. Anything? A half of the suffering? No, it's nothing you did. You really didn't. And I'm certain of that. I'm just certain that there's no way this is just made to fail. There's no way this can work. It's a stupid diagram of creation. It's it's got fail written all over it as an idea. It fails. Torture, 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 torture for the gratification of an addiction to a concept of survival for the sake of survival. I mean, you write this down on a piece of paper, just you can't make any sense out of this. I'm being rhetorical. All right, so I'm also certain it's just all addiction. That basically let's see what I write down. Could in the biggest of the butt. No. Covered in the bias. Oh, okay, of addiction. Yeah, so everything's just covered with this bias of addiction, of our psychological programming, most of which we don't have much. The informed part of us, the educated part of us, doesn't have much, can't do much about. The neurotic, psychotic, I'd call it psychotic, people's, drooling, desire to eat the cow burger. It's kind of psychotic. I mean, if you think about it, it's a psychotic, Pavlovianly psychotic, physiological response. It doesn't need to exist. It only exists because we program it to exist. It's just an addiction. So there has to be a distinction, in the conversation. You have to make a distinction between things that are real, like real needs, like this needs to happen, to save billions of people suffering or something. It needs to exist for some reason, like we need oxygen, or we need water, or we need sex, or we need these are things that are kind of visceral, fundamental, can't escape. But things like procreation, as much as people think, oh, nature programmed that into us. No, it didn't program that into us. It programmed the sex because that was the shortcut. It didn't need us to want to have babies. It just needed us to want to, you know how it goes. And that's what it needed us to do. And even that whole process, like I said, if you went through the evolution of the act of sex, it probably started with some sort of violent thing where a male basically said, I can get my sperm there first by drilling a hole in the female and injecting my sperm in there. That's probably how it started. I mean, that's how nature works. It just doesn't care about any kind of pleasantries. And the only way anything is even the idea of this pleasantry thing, this idea of a gracefulness, is just an idea of it. We had to invent that. It's not a part of the nature. All right. But there's no real need. So procreation is again just like football. It's not necessary to our function. It's just something one society becomes addicted to, right? One society lives addicted to football. Some other society it's cricket. Some other society it's curling or something, or whatever the thing is. And they're just the individual addictions. They're a manifestation of the bullshit that people get attached to completely circumstantially, not for any reason, not for any logical purpose, but just by circumstance. So yeah, if you're going to have a conversation about what it is to have a kid, you have to have in the context of this is a discretionary act. You can't ever call this something that's necessary. It's only necessary like you're hungry to eat a hamburger. You've been programmed to be hungry to eat a hamburger. It's not something that's necessary in the basic function of the organism. So you're a toaster, let's say, on the shelf, and if the toaster said, give me $5 or I won't make toast, give me a hamburger, you'd say, fuck you. You're an inefficient toaster. Costs too much to make you happy. You're too high maintenance. Frankly, if you need the entertainment, of watching football, let's say, it's essentially the same thing as saying you need to paralyze some kids. Because that's what's going to happen. Kids will get paralyzed because of football. Now, if you say you need to watch basketball, it's almost worse, because to say that is to say, I need to keep a bunch of urban kids ignorant and stupid. I need that. I need them to be ignorant and stupid. I need them to aspire for silly ambitions that they have no hope of accomplishing. You know, they're 5'6" and they think they're going to be a professional basketball player. I mean, it's this insane kind of psychology going on here. So you need that to exist. You need those lives to be ruined, to be happy, to be comfortable in your life. No, logically we know that's absolute bullshit. And I think we can say it's absolute bullshit. That our entertainments ought to be at least, okay, not harmful. I mean, for an entertainment, I mean, fuck. Alright, we're not talking about a necessity, we're just talking about entertainments. And certainly our entertainments shouldn't have some sort of paralyzed kid tied to them. That is insane. Insanely stupid. And we should be able to just say, that's insanely stupid. We should design our culture very different if we're creating people addicted to nonsense. So these are things I'm saying, these are my certainty list. I'm certain of this shit. This isn't debatable in a sense. I mean, you're not going to, certainly no one with a common average silly response like there's multiverses and the multiverse says so. Well, that kind of crap isn't going to persuade me. What are you going to use to persuade me that some of this somehow is not correct? Is not an accurate description of our circumstance? There's no what God says so. That ain't going to work. You're fucked. You can't argue, because this is the truth. This is the truth of our existence. We're silly programmed machines, and we can function efficiently in satisfying our gobble play. You know, we can be little Pac-Men that just they just eat dirt. If you had a Pac-Man and he was bopping around your house, but all he did was eat dirt, you'd say, what a cool thing. I mean, that thing is just so fucking cool. He just eats the dirt. Fantastic. And then you had another Pac-Man that shit everywhere and, you know, taking bites out of the cat, you know, was, I don't know, eating your hair. I mean, doing all kinds of nasty shit. You'd say, fuck, why do I want that thing in the house? Yeah, you'd throw that out. You say, fuck this, I don't need that thing. That thing's high maintenance. So I'm just saying, that's the efficiency of our lives. We can be green and efficient, or we can be red and inefficient. And somehow the majority of people have totally lost any kind of focus or ability to recognize or accept that they have to meet a standard. There is a measuring stick here, like we're getting on the roller coaster or something. You have to be a certain height. Well, anyway, so that gets to the intelligence thing, which is where the whole game ends, right? Because I could make the argument that if it wasn't for the happenstance that dumbass people once in a while give birth to some smart-ass people would be extinct. They'd be extinct. They wouldn't exist anymore. They would have gone the way of Cro-Magnon man or whatever, Neanderthal. They wouldn't exist anymore because smart people don't procreate sufficiently to maintain existence, because they're not stupid enough to say, I'll make the decision based on what nature says. Okay, and nature says because my brother died, I have to have 4 kids. You know, or some kind of bullshit like that. Yeah, no, they're smart enough to say, fuck you, I don't have to play by those rules. I'm not stupid. And then, well, obviously, they're also smart enough to know that first, that having kids is it's just covered in responsibility and obligation, that you're creating something for which you're going to be responsible for everything that happens to it. It's all on you. It's your fault, entirely. Anybody a little bit rational says, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to create something that I really can't? It's like having a car, a really high maintenance car, and you can't drive it. I mean, why the fuck would you do that, right? It's something you are obligated to take care of, obligated to buy insurance for, obligated to do all this stuff, and you can, in some ways, derive nothing but bullshit pleasure. Like, my ego is gratified because I have it in the driveway. And technically, I'm doing that, actually. I mean, I actually have a car in the driveway that doesn't go anywhere, but I like having in the driveway though. Yeah, it's funny. Anyway, but obviously it's not a kid, so it's not exactly playing with the same kind of fire. It's a fake fire. It's like a fake fireplace. There's no real fire involved. Where having a kid is real fire, real danger. All right, so that's the context that I would inject onto Pierrot's conversation, where it's all so loose and so detached from anything like let's rationally describe things. So they played with the word meaning, and you're just like, oh well, you're already in big trouble when you use a word like meaning, and then that just leads to words like purpose, and you can't go anywhere with that crap. I mean, you got to stick to words, value words that have a more explicit definition. And again, what are we really doing here? We're just finding a level of comfort and a level of productivity. I mean, as a machine, you're attempting to gain enough of this entertainment shit where your personal psyche is comfortable. You're finding a soft enough chair to sit in, and while you're sitting in it, it would be good if you got something constructive done that made chairs, that made cushions for other people to sit in. That kind of thing, where we just keep making cushions to sit on. Yeah. So we're just exchanging this need thing and finding some mechanism where we can produce gratification for other people as we consume gratification from the environment. Yeah. And that's really what living comes down to. But creating accurate descriptions of the reality, the context of that thing called living, has to be made out of some sort of right answers to these fundamental questions of origin, fundamental function, this consumption, reproduction, cannibalism, addiction, death. This isn't going anywhere. Yeah. So anyway, he calls himself a relativist, which is also ironic and funny when he talks with such arrogance about physics and what the truth is about what has been proven by physics. So he accepts no latitude for people to have any latitude in terms of their interpretation of this physics thing, but yet everything else is in some sort of relative basket where we can just make it up, which is nonsense. So anyway, so meaning, again, I'm going to just argue this logic thing, where what everything is can be described, and you try to accurately describe something. And so they got lost for an hour in a conversation about the word die, D-I-E, because in German it means her. Like somehow that means something. It doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't have anything to do with the properties of a person, a her, or the properties of dying or death. Those two things, the relationship is so tangential and irrelevant that, yeah, it doesn't need to be considered. Which brings me to one part of the physics, because you brought up physics and Feynman diagrams. I really don't want to do any physics here, so I'll limit it to just 2 minutes, I promise. Just 2 minutes. So you brought up Feynman diagrams, and as a description of the fact that, Feynman, it's not really Feynman, it's just physics does this in general. But it has to do with this idea of adding probabilities, as vectors, as arrows, and you add them. And there's this idea of synthesizing an infinite possibility. But it's not really an infinite possibility. And it's not really meaningful, because it's already in a category called impossible. You just don't know it's impossible. I mean, you know it if you think about it. You just don't know it if you don't think about it. That most of what falls in that infinite category is not possible. So its probability is zero. And so I would say this is the kind of way to look at it. Is you're using these arrows that are competing with each other, right? So you have equal arrows. And so when the arrows are equal, when they both go, one goes, this distance in this direction, one goes this distance in this direction. When you put them on top of each other, they would cancel each other out entirely. Well, the idea would be is that if you did all the possibilities, they would become less and less probable. And the fact is they turn, all right? So they end up just curving around and around and around, and they end up doing the same thing at this end. So infinite ends up being this spiral to nowhere. But everywhere in that spiral, as soon as you make this turn, as soon as you get to this point, you're already dead. So the first turn, you've already now entered never happen. Okay, it'll never happen. Once you cross this line, you're in. You have the same probability as the most improbable event in the universe. I mean, it's realistically the same, because this line will always be the same length. You know, no matter how, you know, this turns another turn, this, I mean, arcs. So there obviously have to be a little bit different in terms of how I've drawn this here. But obviously, as this would turn a half turn, this would be turning a half turn in the opposite direction. This line would always end up being the same distance. No matter how you turned it, it would always be the same, because you're spiraling into the same, it's the same spiral, just inverted. And so the line would always be the same length, and it would always be the length of the positive possibility. So the possibility would be wiped out by the improbability. I didn't say that correctly, but the point is that the infinite is in a place where it can't escape into possibility, because it's trapped in a spiral. All right, anyway. That was more than 2 minutes probably, right? Sorry about that. But I mean, I hate that you really shouldn't bring physics into philosophy. I think it's just, but this is what physics has become, right? It's a new religion. The multiverse is a religious idea. The idea that our consciousness is quantum, this is a religious idea. This isn't something based on evidence. It's not even, I don't think it's even in the scope of a rational proposition. It's just made up. It's a fairy tale. All right, I'm going to do one more physics thing just because it pissed me off. You know, he's always saying things like, okay, what I'm suggesting in terms of having an external force that's creating gravity, external graviton, actual physical things that are creating gravity, photons that we don't see because they're called gravitons because they're individual photons. But anyway, that mechanism is irrelevant. It's the same as Einstein. And it's not the same. It's not a replacement. And it first irritates me that he would say it doesn't make any difference, because it's the same thing. Well, yeah, obviously it doesn't make any difference, but it does make a difference. I mean, accurately describing something and inaccurately describing something, even if it makes no difference, should make a difference to you. You should care whether you have it right or you have it wrong, not that the end product would be the same. You know, it's like doing something for the right reasons versus doing something for the wrong reasons. It's just fundamentally you want it to be for the right reasons. And fundamentally, anybody who has any respect for science would want science to have right answers, not wrong answers. So even for that reason alone, it would be right. But I mean, all the things it changes is monumental in terms of it changes your whole understanding of magnetism and electricity, because they're now a form of gravity. And it gets rid of the multiverse. It gets rid of perhaps dark matter and dark energy. No need for them anymore, because you won't be relying on lensing as being evidence of gravity. It changes the whole perspective on relativity. There's absolute velocity, and when you share a velocity with something, then it becomes relative. Me and this piece of paper are sharing the same absolute velocity, and so now we have a relative velocity, but we still have our absolute velocity. It doesn't change. These things are important facts, not unimportant. And there's the Heisenberg principle, you know, that somehow we can't, that photons aren't in one single place. Not that we just can't detect them, but that they don't exist in a location. That's fundamentally wrong, and I think it's significant when you've declared it wrong. So anyway, that irritated me. But see, like I said, this idea of mixing physics and philosophy seems a little bit insane. All right, so where was I? Relativist. Oof. So again, it's about evidence. It's about facts. You gotta have some respect for these things. You know, But again, it's this category and property thing, right? I mean, you can describe everything as having properties, like evolution has properties. It has a mechanism of its function. We can describe its billions of year history. And yes, there's a whole bunch of the videotape we don't have. We don't have every incident of evolution taking place on Earth, but we have plenty of knowledge about the general function of it. And we can make accurate statements about that. And as soon as we make these accurate statements, like it's crude, well, that's a category it goes in now. So now it has a new property. It's been declared crude. It's a crude force, not a sophisticated, fancy, involved force. It's a simple mechanism. It's relying on a simple mechanism, which is make a ton of something, have them move up to the ruler, get their head cut off, if they're not short enough, and some standard, creating this natural selection, this selection thing, and breeding the survivors. I mean, it's a really crude and simple mechanism. So that's a category. That's a description, and that becomes now a property. So now one of its properties is crude. I mean, this is the way we should be. In my opinion, this is the logical way to use words, is to recognize words as having associated properties, and that those associated properties have been acquired through the recognition that having a collection of properties now gets you put in another category, and that category designation gives you another property. Anyway, so I go back to through all this conversation about beliefs, and what matters is just this idea that nature was crude forces in control of the precious commodity. The precious commodity is the sentient, feeling organism. Obviously, the crude force doesn't care about the sentient. It doesn't care about how much suffering is endured. There's no selection process to mitigate against the suffering. And that only we can recognize that. We can see that the system isn't sufficient. It's too precious a thing being ground up in this grinder. It's like grinding up diamonds or something. It's just not the mechanism isn't sufficient to the value it's playing with, and just as we aren't sufficient to be claiming to have the competence or the capacity to play with living organisms. I mean, the idea that you could, say if it was possible, like a Simpsons episode, to buy a package of sea humans, you can just pour them into a bowl and create whole civilizations, whole worlds inside of this bowl. Should people do that just because they want to see what color they come out? Should people do this because they want to create a master race of sea humans? What entertainment value? Should it be an entertainment device? Should a society of sentient organisms be entertainment? We've sort of done that to the animals again, right? I mean, it's bad enough that we've taken some of them and genetically modified them, right? It's just so funny. People are against all this GMO stuff. They don't seem to have any problem with cows giving 50 gallons of milk, or bulls being 4,000 pounds of muscle. They don't seem to have any problem with us genetically engineering their farm animals to produce more yummy bacon. So I mean, it's more the duplicity and the hypocrisy. But anyway, wouldn't there be necessary to pass a law saying you can't create civilizations for your entertainment? you can't just play with these sentient organisms. They're not yours. But like that, as I was stating with the animals, like it's bad enough that we did this farming thing, but look what we're doing to them in nature. We're videotaping it, and putting it on TV, okay, as an entertainment. People aren't gravitated to this stuff because they learn something. They're gravitated to it because they love the adventure of it. It's drama. They're drama whores. They're feeding off of the the um, the battle. It's like somebody looking over a war, and feeding off of the carnage of war. It's sadistic. And that's why I call people sadistic. Is because all seem very sadistic. Not all, but too many of you. So anyway, so I think we're getting towards the ending. Yeah. I have a word in quotes. I don't know what the fuck it is. Torture? Maybe that's what it is. So the right to waste suffering is not what I wrote down. I just don't. Where do you derive any right to in any way squander any amount of suffering? I mean, isn't it the most precious commodity in the universe, right? Suffering. I mean, I think you just have to concede that the worst horror is worse than the best. And that's really the most precious thing is this suffering thing. The colossal failure is much worse than whatever success is, because success is just going to be some toy, some deriving of an entertainment feeling, gratification of desire, and that's all we are. And so if you just change the word of desire to addiction, and then you just understand that addictions can go two ways, right? Desire goes two ways. You can have a desire where you realize the fantasy in real life, and you say, yeah, that was fun, but I wouldn't do it a second time. You just become, it's like you lose all desire because you got there, you did that, you kind of just go, been there, done that. It's done. I don't need to do that again. It's like jumping out of a plane, I would argue. I mean, I only need to go skiing once and to say, shit, I ain't doing that again. This is stupid. It's way too much work for way too little adventure. So, yes, but then there's the other desires that go the other way, where you get a little, it's like the one potato chip thing. You get one potato chip, then you want two potato chips, then you want three. So it's like sometimes with money with people, they get a little bit of money, then they want more money, and then they want more money, and then they want more money. It doesn't stop. And, that's what we're sort of made out of. We're not sort of made out of. My argument is that's what we're absolutely made out of. It's just this idea of we want something we haven't had yet, and we think it's going to be leprechaun gold and it'll solve all our problems, and we realize, no, that really didn't fix anything. And the other downside is that we start wallowing in it, and we just need more and more and more. It has to keep getting better because we get bored with it. So right there you can just say most of our psychology is shit. Alright. So anyway, so this whole idea of perception and meaning, how we perceive things, I think there's a big part of it that can be rationally argued is absolute. You're not really allowed to alter the realm of reasonable here and say, I'm going to put multiverse in the reasonable category, I'm going to put this delusion or God or all this other crap in this reasonable thing. It's not reasonable. It's not a reasonable description of reality based on the evidence that exists. I'm not saying we should pass a law against people believing otherwise, because you can't, but I mean, if you believe otherwise until you have evidence, you basically should just concede that you're full of shit and that your opinion isn't worth much because you have a bunch of wrong premises conflating and confusing your perception of the reality. Yeah, I mean, if you think that it's realistic, there's a pot of gold at the end of rainbows, it's not reasonable. Nobody should have a conversation about, well, what would the implications of that be? No, they shouldn't waste any time on that subject, because they should understand the physics, and it's just a phenomenon, the rainbow, and it's no way it could support the weight of gold. It wouldn't have a pot to put it in anyway. Can't make a pot. Rainbows cannot make pots. It's a fact. It's not debatable. It's just a fucking fact. So, so that's where I'm coming from here. Is that these relativists and these musherites can pretend that they're having a reasonable conversation about reality, but as soon as they start going places where there's no evidence, no reason to believe it, yeah, they might as well just say, don't pay any attention to me because, look, I'm going to premise a conversation about how we do something or what we should do based on a completely false notion of purpose and accomplishment and meaning and all of that shit. It's not relevant. I mean, if you believe cars are grasshoppers, I'm not going to waste time having a conversation with you about how to drive well. Something like that. It's kind of a stretch of a metaphor, but it doesn't really matter. So anyway, I think it's enough of a video. Yeah, so anyway, yeah, whether I am frustrated, but I mean, part of me, I just know that I really have to start writing some of this stuff down, and just have some sort of quick guide to these are the rules of rational conversation. And as soon as you start saying something about a god or some other crap that you have no evidence exists, there's no conversation. Let's just concede that there's no way your reality is going to have anything to do with my reality. What I'm certain of, okay, it's not possible for your crap to be part of what I'm already certain of. So it's just not going to happen. There's no common ground. We're really not the same organism. So I guess that's part of what I got out of Pirro's thing. Because at the end of the conversation was more about social stuff and why and how do we do this functional thing, living with each other. And there's this premise that we somehow have something in common. And in a sense, we only have superficial things in common. Yeah, we have eyes and a mouth and blah, 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 and we're flesh and we've got bones. But there's nothing in common in terms of perception. And that's the most important thing there is. There's nothing in common in terms of how we understand and relate to the universe. There's no common. As soon as somebody can say the word God to me, we can't be more uncommon. I mean, in my opinion, they've got a fundamental question so fundamentally wrong. I mean, not just wrong, but I mean wrong in an insidiously stupid way. I mean, corrosive to perception of everything. No hope of throwing God into the equation and playing a rational game, having a logical conclusion where we both end up with the same place. It's just, there's no likelihood of us ending up in the same place or compatible, without some sort of strangled, logical connections. I mean, they would be as false as the premise. So anyway. But yeah, that's sort of the rule I gotta make, is that, I'm asking for people to give me a counter argument. I think I can make arguments defending the idea that evolution is the only rational answer. I think I can make arguments defending what I say about our psychology and its nature, its function. And what I don't have is counter arguments that have anything to do with a fact. They just have to do with people saying, I don't think so, or I don't want to think so. But nothing to do with a fact. And again, the difference in our values is so extreme because of it, that it would be silly for me to sup with Adolf Hitler. I've made this argument before. But, I mean, even average normal people could understand why they wouldn't want to have dinner with Adolf Hitler. And I shouldn't have to, help them change a flat tire, or whatever it would be. Why would I want to do that? I mean, he's a maniacal asshole. I don't even think, people who work for him were more maniacal, but anyway, that doesn't really matter. For the point of the argument. The point is that we have the most important facts We have no common ground. So then we have no common function. We have no common identity. You can say you're human to me, but it doesn't mean anything. Because in my opinion, all your humanity is lost to your delusions. Yeah, that would be the way to say it. You're not even a toaster anymore. You know, you're just a stupid, fucktarded mechanical device that consumes electricity. You don't even make toast. You really have nothing to justify yourself with. Yeah, you recklessly consume the most precious thing in the universe to produce the nonsense of your gratified ego. I mean, you just can't get dumber than that. You can't get more dysfunctional. Consume suffering to produce ludicrous bullshit. Yeah, no. Baseball. No. No. Wrong answer. So anyway, now that's enough, I think. Okay. Made some cookies. I'm gonna have a cookie. Yeah, no. The stuff I mixed in there. Applesauce, pumpkin powder, gingerbread. Well, I keep some just for witches and such. Almonds, oatmeal, maybe some cat food. I'm not sure. I might have dropped some cat food in it. I'm not sure. But anyway, so that's what I'm off to now. So, yeah. So till next time and such. I feel a little better, a little more focused. I'm gonna figure out how to navigate this better. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. Yeah, whatever. Sure I am. Till next time. And the Kandavad, the molester. I love that. Molester of the truth. And that's what it comes down to. You people, you phantasmagoricals are just molesting torture. You're the tortured. You're using them for your gratification in a sense, to call yourselves heroes. Oh yeah, I could take it. I can take it. Yeah, it's no a little torture. I can take that. Yeah, I wouldn't mind being crocodile food. Yeah, sure you wouldn't. People suck. Yeah, Mike Sagan picture scared me.